Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. One of the common complaints we get in this day and age is that men are increasingly lost. The liberal world can't seem to give them deep enough roots to offer meaning to their lives. If anything, it seems to corrode their soul and their spirit. And with that, we're seeing a decline across Western civilization. I would argue the two are intimately connected. That's led to this interest in initiation into a sacred order, to a tradition, even into a religious understanding. But we see as well when we look around the world that these things don't truly exist, and that can make us feel like we're just basically free falling a lot of the time into all of the trapdoors and temptations of the world. Very often our darker sides start to rule over us because the truth of who we are on the soul level just can't be truly expressed. The light can't come over, can't break through. Now, of course, this isn't so much if you're sort of in that comatose state of modernity, satisfying yourself with the Strictly Come Dancing and the Premier League football and everything else. You can kind of just be blind, and hopefully your soul will just say so dormant you won't realise the true existential pain modern man is in. But many of us do go there, especially those of us who have that spiritual sensitivity intact. And it can be very difficult, and I speak from deep personal experience here, of to know where to go. I mean, I had to search high, low, left, right, east, west, all over the place. Many different traditions I explored, many different things I engaged in, from martial arts practices to hippy-dippy around the fire talking with a load of, sweet and innocent types in the middle of a field. I tried it all because I was seeking, well, where's that path that I need? Of course, as many of you know, that led me into traditionalism and traditionalist spirituality, but that's a video for another time. But this did lead me to one of my most pet peeves, if you will, and that's that modern people, they're sort of right, but they will say, look, there is no initiation in the modern era. It's impossible. There is no sacred order. There is no real space, if you like, for true masculine initiation, because it would probably go against some health and safety regulations and be seen as toxic masculinity and the rest of it. And even when it comes to the spiritual initiation, you could say, well, there are things out there, but they're very often detached from a broader tradition. Religions tend to be very literal, and the esoteric is there, but it's not really integrated into the broader tradition. Again, that would be an issue of decline, as traditionalists would see it as well. But I must say, it really winds me up when you get these professors and they're so eager to make that point. They love making that point. And they're always like, well, it can't be done in this day and age. And I think, oh, God, it's all right for you to say that in your, cushy office with your big salaries, and you go home and, well, like everyone else, watch Premier League football and complain about politics. But it's not okay if you're a massive freaking weirdo like me. I mean, I was in spiritual agony at a certain point in my life, literally on the edge thinking, I don't know if I can do this. Life is getting too hard for me. Now, fortunately, I was lucky to meet the right people, and I was able to start understanding some of this stuff and actually really freeing my soul. And you're like, oh, God, it's like getting into a nice warm bath of water. You're free. And not only, it's not a freedom of just everything's relaxing. I mean, there is a deeply peaceful component, but it also gives you this fire for life. I was always like the key that didn't fit into the lock in my 20s. I got better as my 20s went on, but I did not fit into modernity. I didn't fit in with the cool kids at university. And I didn't fit in with the working world either. I wanted to be on my own, and I was kind of into all lefty ideas when I was younger, seeking for that answer. But that just wounded me even more. And I was deeply wounded anyway from some early life experiences. But anyway, the point I'm making is, I had to go to the edge and even over the edge. And with that, I was, you'd say, one of the lucky ones, or perhaps that spiritual antenna, something beyond me, was on. And it allowed me to align, if you like, to a deeper truth beyond myself. And almost sort of these experiences of dying before you die. I wouldn't say that teaching was truly embedded in me. I still have a big battle with my ego, I think as many of us do on the spiritual path. But I could understand what these people were talking about in the mystic fields, and even in the masculine initiatory fields as well. So my point here is that, they are right, these big professors and scholars, when they say, initiation in this era isn't really possible. But it doesn't mean that things are hopeless. It doesn't mean you can't discover deep fragments of truth that can really change your life. And even I'd go as far as saying on the spiritual plane, even have total realization, as in totally dying to yourself and really sinking into God's being. It's not even really sinking, because there only is God's being, but that's a video for another time. But my point is, in this video, what do we do as men? And the aim here, again, this isn't to be soppy-doppy, basically becoming completely removed from the world and so sensitive and shy that you don't engage with it. I don't think that would be a complete initiation, personally. It's more about what can we do to better ourselves as men, to realign with something truly meaningful where we find we have roots. And from the top, as you can imagine, this journey isn't going to be easy, and we don't want it to be easy, because if it's easy, you're not going to learn anything. It's going to involve periods of unlearning so much that we think we know, and deep challenge, and it might take your whole life, and that's all right, in the era we're in, that's all right, because there's no one to guide us, really. But there are things that can guide us. When I say no one, that's a bit harsh. There are people out there. But I think when it comes to the real depth of the coherent order, there isn't really anything or anyone to guide us anymore. But again, there is always hope there, because this is really what I'm speaking about in this new traditionalism course. Again, if you're interested in it, do check it out down below, where I'm really trying to give people the basics of traditionalism so they can understand what I'm speaking about, but also in their own lives, in their own spiritual foundation, and obviously enhance their felt sense of experience. This isn't personal development, of course. This is probably the opposite of anything. It's more letting go of the self so deeper truths can come through. But these are some things that I've personally found in my own life that have worked. And as I say in that course, I'm not pretending to be some know-it-all guy who's super aware of every single philosopher and all this sort of stuff. I'm saying this as someone who's experienced it, who's lived it. Because, of course, I've read a lot of Evola and Gwenon and all these sorts of things. But the point is that came from a background in really living this stuff, going into non-duality, experiencing all the different forms of, Western esotericism, and even things like boxing, kickboxing, all these practices I was doing to try and challenge myself and so on. Some worked, some didn't. But I did learn some stuff along the way, and I think it's a lot better that we actually have something we can adhere to rather than just nothing. Because if you have nothing, men spiritually die, and then their dark side comes out, you get nihilistic, nothing's really worth fighting for anymore. And there is very much in there for us to align with and find a deeper sense of truth within. So the first thing to say is, and again, if you are doing the course or you've heard many of my videos, you'll be aware of this, the horizontal dimension and the vertical dimension. What do we mean by that? Well, we tend to live in the horizontal dimension, linear time. I was born X amount of years ago, and I'm moving on to the future and so on. And that is valid on one level. But the idea is, if we're stuck on this level, we're really on the mind level of predicting future and past and so on. And in many ways, what we're trying to get to is the more vertical level, which is the experience of the now. That's the great spiritual truth. Now is the only reality. History is just in your mind or something you've read about, and the future is just a projection. And even when you get to the future, it'll be now anyway. So it's not to say you can't make practical plans, but we recognize these are just figments of our mind. They're not fundamental reality, which is now. And in that now, there is a letting go of the self where we realize what we think we are is more spirit or being than it is, the man who goes along life on the horizontal plane. And so the traditionalist, and pretty much any real spiritual teaching, tells you this is where we find the peace that passes all understanding, the true drive, our true identity, and so on. Now, the problem is, what I'm talking to there is quite heavy non-dual truth. And for the average person, you're not just going to be click, oh, well, that makes sense. And this is one of my criticisms of modern non-duality, actually, the Eckhart Tolles. I really like some of the non-dual types. They are very lunar, feminine style, but I'm still very fond of them. But one of my big criticisms of them is that they offer no traditional structure to guide people. It's almost they just lay out these quite heavy truths. It's a bit like psychedelic drugs in a way. You kind of have this shortcut to the end. You're right to the end of the Monopoly board before you've really gone round and had to learn and grow. That's why I say we should welcome the challenge, because again, like psychedelics, if you go and take a mega dose, it gives many people a bad trip that they might not come back from. And it's a bit like that. The teaching's a bit too heavy. And this is why many spiritual traditions throughout time, and I think we have to try and replicate this in any way we can in the modern era, will emphasize a period of priming on the horizontal plane. And we might know this as something like religious rules, exoteric religious rules. That's of the institutionalized version of the religion. That just give you a guide rail of what to do and what not to do. So even if you're not quite getting, the deep spiritual impact you want from your local church or your local practice, whatever it is you do, you can at least think, okay, well, still though, these rules, even if they are being sort of misread a little bit, they're still basically guardrails that were once rooted in a deeper understanding. Like I said, I forget who it was, but a Christian monk once said, we look at the modern church and we see just a rock, but we forget, like a lava rock, it was once flowing fire. And it really was. But now it's almost like we've got a bit lost. It's all made too literal. It's on the horizontal plane. We've lost touch with the deeper truth. So we can already make a step back when we go to our traditions or whatever discipline practice you have in saying, okay, this might feel a bit stale, but the essence of it does hark back to something which is truly life-giving or spirit-giving. And that's where we start. So what is a horizontal discipline that we're really following in our life, And that's there to guide us and, if you like, still the human side of ourselves. So we're ready to be still enough, if you will, to allow that vertical dimension to really take root within us. And that would be the balance, if you like, between the exoteric, that's the institutionalized form of the religion, what you should and shouldn't do, don't touch your winky, all that sort of stuff. And that can almost give birth to the deeper mystical. And I'd even say you can begin practicing both at the same time. It's just, I do strongly believe, and I think it's just a tragedy in the Western world that men don't get this in this day and age. They really don't have any disciplinarian structures. Really, it's because of the death of the father, symbolically speaking. Like I spoke to at the beginning, no masculine initiation, no order. And that means they're kind of free-falling. And that coalesces with the modern ideas of libertarianism. But we've forgotten, well, you can't really be the responsible individual if you have nothing to be initiated into. Then you're just going to get eaten alive by the market and every temptation and chicky poo that comes your way. And that's, of course, what's happening to modern men. But the point is, for us, we need to hark back to a disciplinarian structure. And I know that's strong language. Say devotion if you find it a bit strong. But the idea is we need to find something. It could just be the basic Christian life, the narrow way. What are the rough rules there? Don't wrong anybody, Don't cheat on anyone. Try to be aware of when lust is coming in, when anger's coming in, and when envy, all these dark emotions that seem like they give us these wins and justice, but in the short term, long term, really do detract from your life and kind of carry your soul right down to hell. And again, with that, once we've got that process going, I would say start trying to embrace periods of stillness and silence. There are so many ways you can do that. One of the ways is actually going to be, well, in fact, a lot of this is going to speak to plans I have in the future with regards to the Substack. My plan is to revolutionize it, but I want to get feedback from a few of the paid subscribers over there first to see, how I can best serve them. But my aim is to really start doing this for people. You can obviously have your own tradition and stuff, but to really provide that structure for people on the Substack on a regular basis. Anyway, more on that down the line. But the point is, it's that union of, well, what's the horizontal practice, the discipline practice, and what's the mystical practice where we feel free, where we feel we can really let go. All the tension goes out of your body, and that the truth of what you are, which is in essence spirit or love or God, depending on how you see it, manifests through you and really guides all of your actions. Life becomes more about play at that point than rigid structures. And again, that's where the great teaching comes from. Love and do as you will. But you're not going to be ready to hear that at the basic level. We won't know what it means. We'll just end up saying, like a modern libertarian, well, I'm not harming anyone, bro, and doing whatever the hell you want to do, which tends to make a mess. So again, once we have this basic in, I think then it's time for you, and I will aim to help people on this down the line, as I say, to really start moving into a tradition that you find the most life in. A lot of guys who are drawn to Christianity tend to go down the mystic route, the Catholic route, the Orthodox route. It's not that much in the Protestant tradition of this regard, although there is some. Or even other things. I've seen people go down Zen Buddhist routes and all this sort of stuff. But the point is that it takes time for many of us for the real tradition to reveal itself that we have to follow. Of course, the great tradition, the sacred order, doesn't change. It's just different traditions speak to it in their own way. Of course, Western people, it's pretty much correct for them to be drawn to Western esotericism for reasons that I won't get into now because it would make the video too long. But the point is, that will reveal itself over time as your practice deepens and deepens, and then all the traditionalists will say, you really need to narrow down then at that one path and go through it. The problem is, of course, that we are living in this fractured age. So, and this is, speaking from my experience, it gets difficult then because you don't really have anyone to talk to. You're kind of on your own. And you can try and talk to your local priest, but very often they're just very rigid, very exoteric. It's all about the rules, and they won't really understand what you're saying. Not saying that's true of everyone, but it's certainly true of a lot. And with that as well, how many greats are there in any given tradition in this day and age? It's a big problem. So what that means is, I'm not discounting there being anyone out there. There's always one or two. But broadly speaking, there aren't many people who can really speak to us on that spiritual level. But there is an absolute wealth of material in our history. If you're interested in Christianity, there is just more than you could ever read in a lifetime with regards to the Christian esoteric path, the mystic path, the masculine path. There's just loads. So we are well supported with regards to the past. And with that, of course, as well, we have each other. And this is going to be another big thing on the Substack that we really need. It's dark out there sometimes, friends. I've been there when you feel like, oh, I'm losing my way a bit. It's difficult to let go of the mind when the ego feels like it's being burnt up. You feel like you're going a little bit mad sometimes. I experienced that once in the middle of London, but rang a trusted friend of mine, lovely fella. And we chatted for 10 minutes and he was like, yeah, and I've had that. Deep periods of meditation, and you kind of feel like, oh, where even am I right now? And it's the ego panicking because it's slipping away, and it kind of creates panic in you. But even just connecting with my friend 5-10 minutes, I was just like blissed out after that, and I was probably blissed out for about 3 months after that conversation because if you like, the ego gave up, it died, I'm safe. Now, I'm not saying it never came back, don't have my challenges, but again, it shows these things can be overcome with the support of fellow brothers on the spiritual path. Now, again, I think for us as men, this has got two major paths that you can embrace. There's the priestly path, which is what I tend to be more drawn to, which is basically more mystic. And you have the warrior path as well. Now, I don't think neglect one if you're more interested in the other. I think we need to have a foot in both because that makes the whole man. But we're always going to be more dominant in one arena rather than the other. And there are many things out there in this day and age that you can do. You can genuinely challenge yourself on the warrior's path. Sparring, whatever class it is you do. But I've always said I would personally recommend doing one that aligns with the spiritual tradition all the more. And that's so important because otherwise it just becomes health and fitness and wanting to beat someone up and be a tough guy and flexing your muscles and all that. Which, again, one level that's not bad, but we're looking to go to a slightly higher level here. And the aim is when we bring all of this together, we have a community, we understand traditionalism, we understand our own tradition and how we're practicing it, we can then start to bring the wisdom of the ancients in and sort of give us a bit of a torchlight through the darkness of modernity. And as everything starts to collapse, we'll have a very solid basis to stand upon, not just for ourselves, but for, in my mind, what are going to be millions of men who are going to want to learn this stuff. I'm not saying tomorrow, but I think as the years go on, it's just going to get more and more scary, confusing, and people are going to want roots. And it's this time, I think it's just an absolutely vital time to really invest in this understanding, to learn what it truly means to pray without ceasing. It doesn't mean to be down on your knees all the time. It means to be completely locked in the vertical dimension at all times, being driven by higher knowledge, higher wisdom, if you will. Now, again, as I say, this is going to be part of my major push for the Substack in the new year, so do join because there's going to be a lot of information about that. As I say, I just want to run it by some of the paid subs already because they've been with me since the beginning and learn how I can best serve everyone. But with that, do come and join and let me know your thoughts. And do subscribe to this channel. As always, I'm coaching as well. We'll probably do another round of group coaching in the new year. If you're interested in that, reach out. Individual coaching too. And do subscribe to this channel if you're new. Take care, friends. These are rocky times, but times are ripe for revolution within. And eventually, I think that will turn into evolution culturally and civilizationally.